I greet everyone in the house. Welcome to Yoruba Nation. The topic today is going to be very, very educative. So I implore you to ping in your friends on Clubhouse, your friends off Clubhouse, those who are online, those who are offline. Ping everyone into the room. We are going to really, really learn a lot from today's session. So we will just wait a little bit for the room to get populated, and then we can start in earnest.
This is Yoruba Nation Room. Please kindly follow the room if you are not doing so already. Today, like White Lion mentioned, we're going to be exploring the natural, human, and economic resources of Yoruba land. Please, once again, help us to ping our people so we can get started. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr.
All
Damilare. White
right.
Lion. Yeah.
Um, Otumba, I think we can start. If you can start with the anthem so that we can go ahead. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, to everyone in the room. If you are on stage and you would like to participate in today's session, please raise up your hand to come up on stage. We would also try to crawl through the room chat to see if there are any pertinent questions based on today's session. Um, so I will start. Today's section is going to be divided into um, three major parts. But before we go into those parts, we would like to lay um, foundation, a proper foundation, so that we understand the importance of today's room and why we are actually discussing this topic. Um, So, when we talk about Yoruba land, I mean, what area or what geographical space are we referring to be specific? Um, what exactly is Yoruba land? What do we understand to be Yoruba land? Um, Yoruba land can be defined as the natural, cultural region inhabited by the autochthonous people who are indigenous to that land. It is located in Western Africa, roughly between, in the northern part, Yorubaland spans from uh, roughly between the banks of the Niger River, and it continues as a single cultural region, unbroken, uh, up onto the Mono River in the central parts of Togo. And in the southern part, Yorubaland starts in the area very close to the Escravos and Benin rivers in the present day uh, uh, boundary of Edo and Delta states, and also continues unbroken until it gets to the Weme River in the middle of the Republic of Benin. So, if you look at the shape of Yorubaland, it looks like an upside down parallelogram. So the northern part is more extensive than the southern coastal part. Uh, Geographically speaking, this area, populated by indigenous Yoruba people, covers approximately 150,000 kilometers square in area. And for comparison, like if you want to compare and you want to know how does this rank on the world or on the global stage, this area of 150,000 kilometers square is larger than 102 independent UN member nations or member countries. Approximately the population of people who inhabit or live in Yoruba land, um, along the course of my research it was pretty hard to lay my hands upon, any coherent figures because you have to add, estimated populations from at least three different countries. As well, we all know Nigeria has not conducted uh, a population census since at least the year 2006. So we are only going by estimates here. But if we were to follow the projections of based on the Nigerian government census as well as population census results from the neighboring republics of Benin and Togo, we would see that Yorubaland contains between 55 million and 60 million people as at the year 2020. So that was 2 years ago. Um, of course, the majority of that population that inhabits Yorubaland are ethnic Yoruba people belonging to several peopled clans, amongst which are of course, we are very, very familiar with the Oyos, the Ekiti, the Ijebu, the Ijesha, the Yagba, the Egba, the Ilaje, the Awori, the Ondos, the Barapas, and so on and so forth. There are about 40 peopled clans that, dot the landscape of Yoruba land. And these people, of course, like I said earlier, span uh, three countries as indigenous people. Of course, the Yorubas as a people are united by a common language with different dialects, of course, but united by a common language, a common tradition of origin. Uh, we are also united by geographical contiguity, which means all areas of Yoruba land share direct borders with one another. We are not interspaced by other ethnic groups or other groups of people, you know we all share that geographical contiguity. I mean, if you want to travel from one extreme end of Yoruba land to the other extreme end of Yoruba land, you would not meet any other ethnic group that are not Yoruba people. So that's basically what the geographical contiguity mean. Of course, this allows for the diffusion of ideas. It allows for the diffusion of people between the various Yoruba peoples. Um, Apart from the geographical contiguity, we also share traditional religion. We share ethos. We share value systems, as well as the philosophy of the philosophy of existence, called the Omoluabi. All Yoruba groups have this concept of Omoluabi, which is, you know, the philosophy which is expected that a Yoruba man or a Yoruba woman should live by and abide by. Um, Yoruba land as a cultural space or as a geocultural space is one of the most populated ethnic homelands on the entire African continent, as a matter of fact, um, as well as amongst the Committee of Stateless Nations. The definition of a stateless nation is an ethnic nation, a large ethnic nation without a state to call its own. Um, According to the recent population estimates, how we arrived at the figure of 55 million for the population of Yoruba land. Uh, Figures drawn from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. Uh, Here are the populations of the Yoruba dominated states within the Nigerian geographical space. as well as within the Southwest geographical space, the geopolitical region considered to be the Southwest, as well as other areas of Nigeria which constitute Yoruba land. Um, According to the NBS 2020 estimates, Ekiti State has 3.48 million people. Ondo State has 4.960 million people, which is 40,000 shy of 5 million. Osun State has 5.016 million people. Lagos State, according to federal sources, has 13.38 million people. But the Lagos State government estimations, we all remember that, of course, in 2006, Lagos State conducted the parallel census. And at the time, arrived at a population of 18 million people, 18 million residents in Lagos State. So, according to Lagos State estimates, projection for the year 2018, Lagos State has 25,615,703 people. Ogun State has 5,573,704 people. But we all know that between the years 2006, the base year on which the projections for the year 2020 was based on by the MBS, there's been a massive influx of people into Ogun State. But of course, projections according to governmental sources says that's the population of Ogun State. Oyo State has 8,392,588, also according to NBS projections for 2 years ago. Kwara State has a population of 3,390,330 people. And last but not least, the Yoruba speaking portions of Kogi State has a population of 950,023 people, which is 50,000 shy of a million Yorubas in Kogi State. This gives us a grand total of 56,362,425 people for the Yoruba, the Yoruba speaking areas, or the areas that are ethnically autochthonous or indigenous to the Yoruba people, just within Nigeria. That population is 56,362,425. If you add the Yorubas that are indigenous to other West African countries, I mean, I think about 500,000 in Togo and about 1.5 million in about 1.6 million rather in Benin, you'll be drawing very, very close to a population of 60 million people. And so we go to the next part, which is trying to understand why exactly are we discussing today's topic. What exactly is the purpose of discussing this? I would say that the purpose of today's discussion, uh, or the purpose of why we are having this room, is to discuss the plethora of natural, human, as well as economic resources that are replete throughout the geographical space known as Yorubaland, and to familiarize our people with the vast economic potentials of what a future Yoruba nation would look like, as well as its people. Um, you know, there is a very common rhetoric that seems to be very pervasive amongst our people. They come up with statements like, oh, you guys want to go for Yoruba Nation. What are you people going to, what's going to be the economic activities? Or what are you guys going to export? Or what's going to be the foreign exchange earner for you guys? You know, um, these questions, a lot of time, come from a place of, I would say, ignorance, not knowing any better. Of course, we are having the discussion now, and I think from here, we will be able to learn every one of us will be, including myself, would be able to learn one or two things and realize that Yoruba Nation is more than sufficient to stand on its own as an independent entity. Of course, the greatest resource we have as a nation, as a people, are the Yoruba people themselves. And of course, Yoruba land itself. We all know how important land is to indigenous peoples all over the world. Um, the land sustains every aspect of our living endeavors as human beings, providing fundamental life support systems and the foundation of our very economy and our societies. Um, Majority of the world's wars, from Europe to Asia to the Americas, have been fought over the control of land. So land is the most important factor. In fact, it's the most important unit of economy and productivity. Every other factor of economy is based on land. So land is very, very, very crucial. Land has if we want to define what exactly is land, land has a broad definition as a factor of productivity and can take on various forms, from agricultural uses of land to commercial uses of land, even real estate uses of land, as of course to also the resources that are available both on top and beneath any particular piece of land, which the owners of such land may or may not be aware of. So it's very, very, very important that we safeguard our land as Yoruba people, because land has boundless potentials. Like, you don't know what is under your land, you don't know what potentials any one given piece of land has, whether now or into uh, the nearest or the nearest future. There is also industrial use for land. In fact, this entire discussion can, in one way or the other, be said to revolve around land, and to be more specific, Yoruba land in this instance. Um, if we go and if we go into the history of the world, we would, we all know that the only reason why um, Europe and Europeans ventured out of the old and crowded continent that is Europe was the quest to conquer more land. Europe was overpopulated, so of course, there was this hunger, there was this quest to conquer more land and secure more resources. Um, Europeans ventured out of Europe. They colonized the world, acquiring vast amounts of resources in the process of doing so. We all know that today, um, descendants of European settler populations can be found on just about every continent out there. In the Americas, both North and South, we have, in fact, they are the dominant populations in both Northern and Southern America today, even though they are not indigenous to that continent. Um, of course, Europe being the European homeland. In Africa, there are large populations of settler Europeans. In Asia, we all know um, Russia expanded eastwards from Eastern Europe and, colonized the entire northern portions of Asia. Um, of course, Australia, we all know the sad story of the Australian Aborigines and their encounter in the hands of European settler populations from mostly the British Isles. And actually, for a very long time, to be specific, the year between 140 and 130 BC, um, the civilization of the Han Chinese in East Asia, um, started the exchange of goods, ideas, and services with Western Europe in what would later be known as the Silk Road. Europeans at the time had become very, very used to the steady flow of luxury goods from the Far East, from China, from India, from the Spice Islands, which later became the East Indies, which later became the Indonesian archipelago. Um, Also, goods from Central Asia and the Middle East were flowing steadily towards Europe. Goods such as spices, tea, wool, precious stones, precious metals, horses, paper, agricultural products, including exotic grains and exotic fruits, which could not, of course, could not grow in temperate Europe. Even glassware and Chinese porcelain were finding their way west. Paper and gunpowder, which was developed in China, also found its way into Western Europe, as well as precious metals such as gold and silver were also flowing steadily from the east to the west through um, a series of interconnected trade routes that would later become the known as the Silk Road. However, something very, very important happened in the year 1453, and this flow of goods, people, ideas, and merchandise became closed off. By who? It was closed off by the Ottoman Turks. Uh, of course, because of the enmity that existed between the Ottoman Turks, which were based in Istanbul, and they were, of course, uh, the Ottoman Turks in Istanbul were the ones who expanded the Ottoman Empire into southeastern Europe, or the Balkans, as well as into the Middle East. So what happened was the Ottoman Turks boycotted trade with Western Europe and stopped all flow of goods from East Asia, from the Middle East, from Central Asia into Western Europe and Southern Europe as well. Because of this stop in flow of these goods that Europeans they became very, very used to over the years. The Europeans had to do what they had to explore. They had to leave the European. They had to leave Europe and explore trade routes that would land them in India, in the Spice Islands, and in Eastern Europe, where these goods used to come from. So, what did they do? The Europeans, they took to the seas to find new trade routes in order to secure the trades, the trade and the products that they've always known and loved. And in the year 1492, in the late 15th century, 1492 to be precise, the Spanish Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain um, commissioned a very, very eager Italian explorer. We all know who that man was. His name was Christopher Columbus, um, to seek a faster and more direct route to Asia. And what did he do? He sailed west on three ships, the Pinta, Nina, and the Santa Maria. He sailed west from Spain and began to explore. And then in August of 1492, Columbus landed on some Caribbean islands, thinking he thought he had landed in Asia, but he landed in Caribbean, because we all know when you sail west from Europe, the only place where you will get to are the Americas. So although Columbus mistakenly believed that he had landed on one of the islands in East Asia, later Europeans would later add to that knowledge of the land. And thanks to the voyage of fellow Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci, um, Vespucci was able to determine that Columbus had not landed in Asia, but instead had reached a new world of people, uh, an entirely new land that had not been, hitherto discovered by the Europeans. So, what happened afterwards was basically uh, a rush for land, a rush for resources amongst various competing Europeans. Um, each of the major European powers, Spain, France, the Netherlands, England, Portugal, would commission their own explorers to sail west and discover riches, discover new lands, in quotes, for Europeans. They all sent explorers to explore this new world, what they called the New World. Um, of course, the motive for these explorations, like I said, was colonization, the desire for wealth, the desire for resources, the desire for more land, and the desire to establish permanent settlements in what was basically a land or a resource rush. And coming back to the African continent today, South Africa, which is a product of these, you know, this era of Europeans venturing out of the continent to establish settler colonies all over the world, um, suffers from one of the highest uh, or one of the most unequal societies anywhere on the world. Um, of course, as a result of the legacies of apartheid, various scholars have identified one thing in particular to be the major reason why, since the year 1994, when apartheid officially ended, Black South Africans have still not been able to bridge the inequality gap, despite all the affirmative action programs that have been, that have been affirmative action, handouts from the government towards poor and struggling Black populations in the country. And that one thing that has been identified by by economics to be the reason why this gap continues to widen rather than being bridged is the fact that Black South Africans do not own land. Land ownership amongst Black South Africans is close to nil. Like the lands have been taken over by settler European populations, and as such, the upward social or economic mobility of Black South Africans continue to be uh, a goal that seems unassailable or unreachable, unfortunately. And until, of course, the government starts to redistribute or reappropriate that land back to the indigenous owners of those lands, it would be very, very, very difficult for black South Africans to move up the wealth and social ladder in that country. Like I said, despite various years of affirmative action from the government towards Black South Africans, majority of Black South Africans still remain very, very poor. According to a 2017 government audit by the government of South Africa, more than 75% of the nation's private land is still owned by white people. More than 75% of lands in South Africa is still owned by white people, despite the white population constituting only 7.7% of the population. So, I mean, just imagine if one group that isn't even up to 8% in Nigeria, owned 75% of all lands in Nigeria. So you can imagine how, just imagine, I mean, just that's, you can see how skewed like this whole thing is. And you can begin to understand why, you know, Black South Africans continue to struggle because, like I said earlier, land is the basic unit of economic prosperity of any people anywhere in the world. um 7.7% of the population owning 75% of the land, and we haven't even talked about the lands owned by the colored people. There is a group of people in South Africa known as the colored, which, I mean, they are basically mixed race people. We haven't talked about the lands owned by uh Asians in South Africa. you know we haven't talked about the lands owned by every other group of people, but whites alone already control 75%. So for the Black population, which constitute over 80% of the population, land ownership continues to be elusive, continues to elude them. So in essence, the very existence or the continued existence of a people or a nation uh, anywhere in the world is based on the premise rather of them having a tangible indigenous land under native control that they can call theirs. The more people lose control, or the more people lose grip of their native lands and the connection to its sanctity and sacredness, the more those people lose the central theme that is their identity of being. So your identity as a Yoruba man, your identity as a Yoruba woman is tied to the land that is Yoruba land. The more we as Yoruba people lose control, lose grip, lose native authority of our land and the connection to its sanctity or its sacredness, the more we lose the central theme that is our identity as Yoruba people. So, before I go into talking about the resources and breaking it down into the three aspects we are going to discuss today, which are going to be natural, human, and economic, um, anyone who has any questions can unmute their mics right now, ask those questions about anything I must have said prior to now, and we will be going into the flesh of today's discussion in the next few minutes. Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, you can unmute your mic, or if you have any rejoinders or any submissions to make, you can unmute your mic to ask. Otherwise, I will just continue. Is there anyone? Okay. Uh Now into the resources of Yoruba land. Like I said, this section rather is going to be divided into the natural, the human, and the economic. And it is my hope that time is going to be enough for us today to discuss this all the points that I have here. Of course, Otumba is also going to make um, a submission um, talking about the human resources of Yoruba land, and which is basically the Yoruba people. He's going to make a submission. Um, Now, talking about natural resources, there are numerous occurrences of various naturally occurring uh, industrial elements, industrial compounds throughout Yoruba land. However, we will only focus on those elements or those industrial metals where Yoruba land has a comparative or competitive advantage in its production. Um, in other words, like, resources that are economically viable, and areas in which, we exploring those resources would make us at least competitive on a global, or at least uh, on a regional scale. So, the first industrial resource that I have here is iron ore. Iron ore. Um, Iron ore in Yoruba land can be found in an area populated by an indigenous subgroup of the Yorubas known as the Oworo. They can be found in Kogi State near the banks of the Niger River. Um, they constitute um, between 35 and 50% of the indigenous population of Lokoja local government. And this area hosts the largest and the purest reserves of iron ore in Nigeria, and like I said, one of the purest reserves of iron ore on the African continent. The area is called the Agbaja Plateau. Agbaja Plateau has an estimated reserve of 1.25 to 2 billion tons of between 40% and 54.2% iron ore grading. This area alone has about 40% of all of Nigeria's iron ore reserves. Um, this same reserve on the Agbaja Plateau, like I said, is one of the largest on the African continent, and is the reason why Nigeria ranks, according to various sources, as the country with the second largest iron ore reserves on the African continent and 12th in the world. The grade at which iron ores become economically viable to mine, because it's not all iron ore it's not all iron ore reserves that can be mined, because some of them are not economically viable. But the iron ore that presents at Agbaja Plateau, um, on the land of the Oworo Yoruba people, has, like I said, between 40% and 54.2% iron by weight. And any ore reserve, any iron ore reserve, anywhere in the world, needs to be, becomes economically viable at 25% iron. So that is why the iron ore that can be found there is one of the purest on the African continent. And presently, um, there are several companies eyeing mining prospects, in that area. Presently there's an Australian company that is developing the project through a Nigerian subsidiary known as the KCM Mining. Uh, the Agbaja iron ore project includes the development of an iron ore mining processing operation capable of producing 5 million tons of upgraded iron ore concentrate per annum. Apart from the reserves, the vast reserves of iron ore in the Kogi West Senatorial District, there are also viable reserves of iron ore in Oyo and Kwara states. Three occurrences of iron ore in Oyo State occur around, it can be found in the Ogbomosho axis, mostly around an area known as Bede and Najashe. Um, these areas, the ones in Ogbomosho, contain mostly hematite and magnetite iron formations with an iron grade of around 34.4%. Don't forget that I said earlier that for any iron ore seam to become economically viable, it has to contain at least 25% of iron ore by weight of material mined. So the reserve in Kogi um, contains around 54.2% iron ore by weight on average, while the one in Oyo uh, contains around 34.4% ore by material mined. So, um, the reason why the we all know about the Ajaokuta steel complex that is built on the banks of the Niger in Kogi State, in the town of Ajaokuta. The reason why it was built was basically to mine and to process those iron ore reserves that can be found on the Agbaja Plateau and in the surrounding areas, such as Itakpe, very very close to Itakpe is very close to Okene. The Ajaokuta Steel Complex was built to be fed iron ore deposits from, like I said, Agbaja, as well as an area known as Ushokoshoko in Lokoja local government. Um, Construction in Ajaokuta started in 78, 79 by the Soviet Union. The Soviets were the ones who built the complex. Um, in 1967, 2 years. No, actually, that's more than 10 years. 12 years to be precise, before the Ajaokuta Steel Complex was built. Soviet experts had recommended for that they had begun prospecting for viable iron ore reserves in Nigeria, and you know the known deposits at the time were of very, very poor quality, because the percentage of iron ore in the known reserves at the time by weight was not did not meet the cutoff mark. So they were of very, very poor quality. They were also very, very high in phosphorus, which makes sheet iron, and it makes iron very, very brittle. So any iron ore reserves that contains very high phosphorus content is not um, you know companies try to avoid them because, like I said, it makes iron very, very brittle. So they started exploring for iron ore throughout Nigeria, and the place where they could find quality iron ore seams to feed um, the steel complex. And in 1973, the iron ore of the required quality was discovered in Tajimi, in Oshokoshoko, and in Ajabanuko, all in Kogi states. But unfortunately, more than 40 years after the completion of the Ajaokuta Steel Complex, that steel mill has still not produced a single sheet of steel more than 40 years after that complex was completed by the Soviets. That just shows you that Nigeria is one place where dreams go to die. Like, I don't 40 years after, not even one single sheet of steel has been produced from locally mined iron. But anyways, what are the uses of iron and what is iron used for? Iron accounts for approximately 95% of all metals used uh, by the modern human industrial complex, the modern human industrial society. Um, Depends on iron and the products derived from iron, such as steel, for 95% of, of all industrial uses. It's used for making steel, which, together with concrete, is considered as one of the two foundations of our modern world. So that is how valuable iron is, you know, to any modern economy. Anyone who wants to build a modern functioning society anywhere in the globe would have to either produce steel locally or import steel, because steel is used in pretty much everything: buildings, bridges, name it, you need steel. If there's anyone who has any questions about iron ore, they can ask. Otherwise, I go to the next resource. Okay, no questions. The next resource I'm going to talk about is bitumen or tar sands. Bitumen was first discovered in the year 1900, with focused exploration beginning in the year 1904/1905. Uh, Bitumen in Nigeria or in Yorubaland can be found in an area spanning between Lagos State in the west and Edo State in the east. So, four four states uh, constitute an area known as the Bitumen Belt in Nigeria. These areas are Lagos State, Ogun State, Ondo State, and Edo State. But the core of Nigeria's or Yoruba land's Bitumen Belt is based on two local government areas in Ondo State, which are Okitipupa and Irele in Ondo South Senatorial District. A company known as Konoko. Konoko has performed a technical and economic valuation of these bitumen deposits and believes that there are over 27 billion barrels of oil that can be retrieved from these bitumen and tar sand seepages that can be found in Ondo State. Like I said, the southern belt of Yorubaland, where the bitumen can be found, has been dubbed to be that area has been dubbed the bitumen belt. And once again, like I said, this area cuts across Ogun State, Lagos State, Ondo State, and Edo States, and spans over 120 kilometers. But it is centered um, on southern Ondo State in Okitipupa, Irele, and Odigbo. Um, this area, right, this bitumen belt, has been described as by various sources to be the largest deposit of bitumen on mainland Africa, and the second largest deposit in the world, with about 45 billion metric tons of bitumen buried under the soil, under very shallow layers of the soil, actually. A recent technical and economic valuation of bitumen uh, in southwestern Nigeria was conducted, and it was observed that um, the bitumen belt contains it contains between 13 to 16 billion barrels of oil that can be retrieved from these bitumen layers, uh, which accounts for around 45% of Nigeria's conventional oil reserves. So conventional oil that is the oil we all know, is the crude oil we all know, which can be easily tapped, which can be easily you don't mine oil, which can be easily, I forget what the word was, but that's what is known as conventional oil. So oil which you just need to drill for that oil, and then you need to pump. And then non-conventional oil, can be described as oil resources that can be gotten from uh, either tar sands or fracking operations. So these are non-conventional sources for crude oil. And the bitumen belt contains, like I said, between 13 to 16 billion barrels of oil, which, you know, if that area is looked into, would contain with the estimated value of the oil which can be retrieved from that bitumen belt constitutes around 45% of Nigeria's conventional oil reserves that can be found in the rest of the Niger Delta, which at currently stands at around 38 billion barrels. Um, the price of bitumen right now in international markets, particularly the emulsion type bitumen, uh, costs between $40 to $50 per barrel, or between 280 and $310 per ton in the international market. And as at 2017, um, the price of 1 barrel of bitumen in the local market in Nigeria was 175 naira. So um, it would surprise you to know that Nigeria actually imports bitumen. Uh, to Nigeria imports bitumen from from Europe and even from other African countries to use in construction projects, even though there are vast there are vast resources of bitumen in parts of the country that they're just there untapped. What are the uses of bitumen? Like I said, bitumen can be used in emulsion paints. Uh, it's widely employed in road and civil construction as binding aggregates to create asphalt concrete. Bitumen is also used in waterproofing as well as in roofing and construction projects to prevent water leak. Currently, uh, Nigeria imports around 4,703,000 tons of processed bitumen yearly, according to the World Trade Organization, and also imports about 5 million tons of emulsion type bitumen at latest estimate in the year 2019. The estimation of Nigeria's current yearly import of bitumen stands at around 400 billion naira. So Nigeria spends around 400 billion naira importing bitumen into the country when there is, I mean, anyways, um, that's 400 billion, between 300 and 400 billion that Nigeria spends on importing bitumen. Do you know, or would you know that that amount is larger than the annual budget of more than 30 Nigerian states out of 36 and the FCT? So the amount Nigeria spends on importing bitumen is larger than the annual budget of 30 Nigerian states, excluding only Lagos, Ogun, Rivers, Delta, and Akwa Ibom. It is actually very close to the annual budget of Delta State. The annual budget of Delta State is stands at around, I think it's even more, stands at around 308 billion naira annually. So I would just say 5 states, and it is more than double. The amount Nigeria spends on importing bitumen is more than double the annual budget of the states that hosts the largest reserve of bitumen, which is Ondo State. The annual budget of Ondo State is what? 171 billion naira. So the amount that the country spends importing a resource that is basically that the amount Nigeria spends on importing bitumen is more than the annual budget of the state that hosts bitumen in in hundreds of thousands of tons. You can imagine how frustrating that is, that a country that is not even able to, I mean, on the civilization scale, what level would you grade, if there was any such society, anyways, on what level would you grade a country that cannot even explore the resources at its own backyard? I don't think I would even grade that kind of society as, I don't know, if there is any strata of civilization, I wouldn't even grade them as level one, because things that are in your environment, you can't even use them, which is like something as human beings we should is one of the things that we as humans are built to do, to terraform and to use the resources at our beck and call. But Nigeria as a country cannot even use its own resources. It has to import something that you have in abundance. Disgraceful, to say the least. I'd like to take a break here, and I'll be back in the next 2 minutes. If there's anyone who has anything to say, they can unmute their mic at this point. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, White Lion. Yeah, so we've got a few questions coming in. Keep them coming in the back channel if you are not uh wanting to come upstairs or up to the stage to speak, whether because you're in transit or because you're walking, whatever the reasons might be. Feel free to send your contributions or comments or questions through the group chat or directly to myself or to any of the moderators. Again, you're welcome to Yoruba Nation. Thank you for joining this conversation today. One of the reasons it's really important to have this conversation is that great nations are built in your head, in my mind, when we start to think about the possibilities, when we start to imagine what can be that is not. And after that is when we start to talk about it, when we start to proclaim and confess that which is possible. And eventually, when we start to get to work to make the dreams come to life. Thank you so much, Mr. White Lion, for leading the conversation today around the natural, human, and economic resources of Yoruba land. And I'm just going to go through some of our comments. We don't do that often, but I'll just scroll through the group chat and I'm going to take a few contributions from our listeners. Val OJ said, this is a serious warning to all indigenous people to preserve their territories. It's like we've heard it all and we should just close. Thank you so much for sending in your contribution, Val OJ. Aisha Noye also said that and also the word wealth accumulation always goes hand in hand with exploitation and dispossession. Thank you so much, my sister Aisha. I can't shout nor fight. The more they lose their identity and get assimilated, it is sure museum straight. Aisha also said, land is power, land is wealth, and more importantly, land is about race and class. The relationship to land, who owns it, who works it, and who cares for it, reflects obscene levels of inequality and legacies of colonialism and white supremacy in the United States. I Can Shout also said, assimilation left, right, and center. Aisha said, government ownership of land in Africa is the chief cause of poverty on the continent. Aya Kamara mentioned that you are connected to your ancestral land. Once taken over, you won't determine your future. Our Yoruba land has been taken by the 1884 to 85 Berlin Conference, then 1914 amalgamation by Lugard, then 1999 Nigerian Constitution. Aya Kamara also said land is scarce. So those are a few comments. There are still a lot more. Uh, but there is a particular question from our brother, Mr. Olamide. I'm just scrolling to see. Okay. At White Lion, in your view, which three natural resources have the highest value if you were to prioritize exploration? Which three? All right, thank you so much. Think Tank also said One Nigeria is a graveyard of the best brains and the best ideas, a place where dreams die and geniuses become reprobates by virtue of the failed Nigerian construct. Uh, White Lion, that is a question coming from Olamide uh, Enyila. I don't know if you'd like to take that or if you. Okay, maybe we should take one or two more questions if there are any questions from our people up on the stage. Mr. Ojo, Mr. Olu, Mr. Olabala, any questions, any contributions, please feel free. You can flash your mic and we can have you take the floor.
Uh, yeah, excuse me. I just want to make a contribution.
Okay, sir.
Uh, yeah, as White Lion has mentioned, there are key factors of production. Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, and all these, abound in Yoruba land. We have them abundantly. So, people that say Yoruba land will, go broke or Yoruba land will be poor if we have Yoruba Nation, they don't know what they're talking about. Today, 85% of all the companies registered in Nigeria are located in Yoruba land. That is, it's the Yoruba region that's responsible for 85% of companies' income tax, education tax, infotech tax, and capital gain tax in Nigeria. So imagine if we were to have that all to ourselves. Yoruba land is blessed with three coastlines, Lagos, Ogun, and Ondo, of which Ondo has the longest coastline, I believe, in West Africa. So, 90, I'm sorry, I just had a call. Um, the total 95% of Nigeria's import and export duties are realized from Yoruba land, and that's only from Lagos. Imagine if we were to add Ogun and uh, uh, Ogun and Ondo to that. Imagine how much revenue we will generate. So we need to develop these things, and we have them abundantly. So there's no way we will grow poor in Yoruba land. Another thing that we don't mention, and I've always said it. Our language is a form of capital. Our cultural identity is a form of capital. Our mythology is a form of capital. And our philosophy, mostly our spiritual philosophy, is a form of capital. Yoruba language is the liturgical language of Ifa. Ifa is a spiritual philosophy that's not only restricted or practiced in Yoruba land, it's practiced all over the world, mostly in North and South America. We can capitalize on this. So there are a lot of things to be gained, even from our spiritual philosophy. Saudi Arabia today makes annually probably roughly what Nigeria makes. From Saudi Arabia makes in tourism roughly what Nigeria makes. Annual Nigeria's budget. So in Yoruba lands, in Yoruba, we have a spiritual philosophy that we can also capitalize on. We can minimum raise $10 to $15 billion just from tourism alone. But we have to promote, our spiritual philosophy. We have to promote our language. We have to promote our mythology. There are things to be gained from all these things. So, resources, of course, natural resources are very important, but also, our natural resources are also important. And, example would be, our language, our culture, our spiritual philosophy. And also, there are 11 custom commands in Nigeria, and in Nigeria today, in Yoruba land, actually. And these custom commands generate close to $750 billion. I mean, 750 billion naira. Imagine if we had all those to ourselves, because in Yoruba land, we can even have more custom commands. So the opportunities of the Oodua Republic as a foreign nation are vast, and we just have to develop them. And that is why we need to fight for this, Yoruba nation that we've been talking about. And I implore all Yoruba nationalists to come together and fight for Yoruba nation. I will add more as we move along. I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my dear brother Ojo. Okay, so back to question from Mr. Olamide. Which three natural resources in Yoruba land can be prioritized, should be prioritized the most? I think Mr. White Lion had only covered two of those, iron ore and also the bitumen. In my opinion, if you consider just focusing on those two that have been discussed, um, so far. I think focusing on iron ore uh, is where we're going to have the most return on investment, just because, as we know, and as mentioned by White Lion, the cost of production, the cost of exploitation and exploration of the bitumen vis-a-vis the cost per barrel um, does not really do justice, or does not give us the uh, return on investment as compared to iron ore. And I'm going to leave that to White Lion to discuss further, and also to introduce us to more Yoruba land natural resources. White Lion, you can have the floor, sir.
Before White Lion goes, Otumba,
Okay.
so
Yes, please
there's
go ahead.
a question from a certain ask in the back channel about Ikwari in Kwara State vis-a-vis source of iron. So if White Lion would like to shed light on that. So he's basically asking if Ikwari has this iron concentration because of some historical narrative that has to do with iron from that part of Yorubaland. So about Tomolesi.
Thank you, Mr. Olawala. Is it Ikponri or Ikponri?
Oh, it must be Ikwari. Ikwari.
All right. So uh Agbaja in local local government, the is not the only area with iron ore reserves in the country, but it's the most notable one, right? Like I said, just this area contains more than 40% of all of Nigeria's iron ore reserves. It has around 2 billion tons in just this area alone. And there are already feasibility studies have already been done and completed by Australian mining coys. Like we know, Australia is actually the country that produces the most. They are basically experts in iron ore exploration. Not only iron ore, rare earth metals. Australians are giants in mining. So whenever you see an Australian firm showing interest in a place, doing feasibility studies, and telling you that the resources you have in this area are economically viable, then you better take their word for it, because they've been doing this for years. And they are, as it stands presently, Australia is one of the highest when it comes to mining, when it comes to the production of you know industrial metals from the ground, from the surface of the ground. Australians are one of the top. In fact, they are, together with the Russians, uh, the Americans, the Canadians, and the Brazilians. Those are the giants of the world's mining industry. So, but of course, Australia sits at the very top of it. Um, but when it comes to, so like I said, this Ikmorin area that you talked about might have um iron ore resources that can be explored, but it seems not to be, at least from what we know so far. There could be discoveries in the future, but from what we know so far, Ikmorin does not really. Of course, Agbaja is not the only area with iron ore. There are also iron ore reserves in Oyo State, like I mentioned. I already mentioned the area around Ogbomosho to be very, very rich in iron ore. The iron grade that can be found in and around Ogbomoso in a place known as, I'm not sure what if the pronunciation is Oko or Oko, um, Bege or Bege, or sorry, forgive me if I butcher these pronunciations. I'm not very familiar with the area. As well as at Jashe, contains between 39% and 42.7% iron ore grade. So Ikmori might be an extension of the Ogbomosho iron ore belt, because, like we all know, Ogbomosho to Kwara State is less than what Ogbomosho to. It's very, very close, very, very close. Once you get to Ogbomosho, you are basically beckoning on. You are looking at the gateways you are looking at the gateway of Kwara State, basically. So it might be an extension of that belt that runs from Ogbomoso. It might also run into Ikborin area in Kwara State. So that area is also one of the richest iron ore beds in Nigeria. So I hope that answers the question of the person who asked about Ikborin. To the other question, which resources are the three most valuable, in my opinion? I think iron ore is valuable because if we can explore our iron ore reserves and start producing steel bars and steel sheets, then we could be Yoruba land, or a prospective Yoruba nation could become self-sufficient in steel production, which means you don't have to import steel from the west or the east. You don't have to bring in Chinese steel or anything, so you can save all that cost. The second resource, I would say, natural gas. And the third resource, I don't know. I'm torn between uh, the marine resources and um, gold prospecting. And that's the next resource that I'm actually going to talk about. And when I talk about that, you would see the reason why I actually see gold as um, one of the major resources that we could look into as on the road to self-sufficiency. One of the resources that we could look into uh, to become self-sufficient. So if there are no more questions, I would go right away into the next resource, like I said, which is going to be gold. So gold is a of course it's a precious metal. Um, it's the third most valuable element in the world, after two other metals, platinum and palladium. So gold is number three, but it's one of the rarest, and it's very, very valuable. Uh, in Yoruba land, gold occurs naturally in Ondo State, in Yagba East and Yagba West areas of Kogi states. Uh, have I mentioned Ondo State? But of course, out of all these areas where you can find gold in commercial quantity, the most valuable of them all is the reserve that can be found in Osun State, and I'll go into that. The gold deposits that can be found in Osun State is worth at around $6 billion at today's pricing. According to a research finding by Professor Olugbenga Kindeji Okunola, a professor of geology at the University of Ibadan, that is more than 3 trillion naira of gold reserves in Osun State at today's price of gold. And within Osun State, you can mostly find gold around Ilesha and the Ife axis. Ikmerindo, a small Ilesha hamlet, is one of the 7 principal gold-bearing locations in and around Ilesha Township. And Ikmerindo alone hosts or holds more than 1 million ounces of gold. Just Ikmerindo. And like I said, Ikmerindo is one of 7 gold-bearing areas in and around Ilesha Township. So Nigeria at present is becoming one of the new frontiers for gold mining, not only in the sub-region of West and Central Africa, but also globally. A research paper that was published in 2014 by the European Journal of Business and Business Management, which was titled The Mineral Prospecting Potentials of Osun State, said that there are at least 20 million ounces of gold available in Atakumosa East, Atakumosa West, and Ife East areas of Osun State. Again, the research paper, which was published in 2014 by the European Journal of Business and Management, says there are more than 20 million ounces of gold in these 3 local government areas. I'm not sure what the senatorial district division of Osun State looks like, but I think those areas are all in Osun East. Um, that quantity, these 20 million ounces of gold that are replete in these areas, these gold resources are said to be exploitable over a period of at least 50 years at an economic rate of 850 ounces of gold bar production every day. Uh, the flagship gold mining project, not only in Osun State, but in all of Nigeria till date, is a project known as the Segilola Gold Mining Project. It is Nigeria's largest and only commercial gold mine, presently projected to produce between 80,000 and 100,000 ounces of gold in 2022. Just in this year alone, it will produce between 80,000 and 100,000 ounces of gold. I think last year they produced around 85,000 ounces of gold. Sorry, as at late last year when the project started. So Seguilola, like I said, would produce 80 to 100,000 ounces just from, I think Seguilola is in Odo Ijesha, in the area around Ikmerindo. Not very far from Ilesha, actually. And it would produce this 100,000 ounces of gold at an all-sustaining cost of between $850 to $950 per ounce. So do the math. $950,000 for every ounce of gold. Multiply that by 100,000 ounces of gold that is going to be produced from Segilola mines. So Segilola for the year 2023 to 2027 is expected that production yield is expected to rise to more than 100,000 ounces of gold for the next 4 to 5 years. And from there, it's expected to stabilize and continue producing at that rate. Segilola has been touted to sit on top of the largest gold deposit in Nigeria, even larger than what is in Zamfara, where bandits are running amok. So do the math, and you know, you can think of that whatever you want to think of that, but like at present, Osun State holds the largest gold reserves in the country. What is gold used for? Number one, gold is used as a mechanism of wealth protection. It is used as a backup for currencies, a backup for national currencies, and a backup in the form of reserves. So it can basically be used as a physical store of wealth. Why? Because the value of gold does not depreciate over time. So it is a very, very, very good currency saving mechanism. So think about how that is going to be keyed um, into the mechanism of currency protection in a prospective Yoruba nation. Gold is also highly utilized in high-end electronics, and also it is used or sought world over as you know high-end luxury or luxurious goods, gold-plated iPhones, gold ornaments, gold medals, and so on and so forth. So those are the things that gold is used for all over the world. And like I said, Nigeria has been recognized as one of the emerging centers, or one of the emerging areas for the prospect of gold production into the future. So all these are just the official figures of gold. We all know that there is a lot of artisanal or illegal gold mining going on in Osun State and in Ondo State. If you go to some areas now in Atakumosa East, you would see a lot of people from Zamfara. You would see a lot of people from Kano. Basically, you would see tons of gold panas who are just there mining gold. and all these figures are unaccounted for. So these are illegal gold miners that just they come into those areas, they take over those areas, and they basically start mining. And whatever quantity that they produce goes unaccounted for. They go and sell them to gold merchants, whoever they are. It's mostly a black market. So all these figures, all these quantities remain unaccounted for. And there is a whole lot of illegal mining activity going on presently in Osun State. So does anyone have any questions about gold?
No, not more of a. It's more of a contribution, like
Oh yeah,
historical
of course, Mr.
perspective
Allah. Yeah.
than a question. So, talking about gold in Yorubaland, especially in the Osun State area, about 700 years ago, a certain Arab traveler visited this part of the world from say Middle East, Kolutiwani, or somewhere in North Africa. It's one of the most traveled persons in human history, pre-modern times. So he visited Mali particularly, and from Mali he heard about Yorubaland, Ife particularly, and one of he wrote many things about Ife. So one that is striking, and that relates to you know this gold narrative is the fact that he mentions in his report, Wikpe, this particular land of the blacks, Ife, which he transcribed in the Arabic transliteration as Yufe, Yufi, going by the standard Yoruba form that man pe Ife as Ufe. So he wrote it as Yufe. Wikpe, there is presence of gold amongst many other things. So this is like 700 years ago. So now this has been corroborated by modern discoveries. So I thought I should chip in the historical perspective that even before modern times, we've long known 700 years ago, and of course more. 700 years is just saying written evidence for that. Of course, many years before then, that there is the presence of gold in abundance in Yorubaland, particularly in the Oshun area, Ife to be precise. And this is mentioned by Ibn Battuta during his visit to Mali. And there are articles for this to, analyze his writing the Arabic writings. J.E.J. Sutton, you can check that work. He called it Ibn Battuta's Yufi, Bronze and Gold in Mid-Iron Age Africa. So there's a lot. He went into details to try and identify this black civilization that Ibn Battuta is talking of. And the conclusion was that this is none other than Ife. So I thought I should bring that perspective.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add to it that the issue of gold and how and the impact it will have to European land is actually very big. So a lot of there's on my PTR now. There's a picture of a young guy called Shegun Lawson. So Shegun is the CEO of Tor Exploration, and is heavily involved in the Segi Lola project going on. So they're worth about $1 billion, and a lot of the taxes and revenue that should be going to the Osun state government and making the state more viable actually goes to Abuja. So, and also, if you look at the ease of business that it could have brought and the wealth it could have brought, we're actually losing a lot from it. So, I just thought I should chip in on that on TOS production. So for a long time I've been going through budget, and I noticed that according to budget and the analysis, Osun State is they describe it as one of the non-viable states, and this is because unfortunately the revenues from gold production from private companies like TOS production, TOS exploration, sorry, a lot of the taxes that uh, could have been gotten from the exploration doesn't go to Oshu State at all, but rather goes to the federal government. So yeah, I just thought I should chip in that.
Hmm. Uh, that's something. There is also, I'm going to pin an article from the International Center for Investigative Reporting. Uh, this article is basically what some undercover uh, investigative journalists discovered in uh, two communities in Osun State, and Ifewara, and I forgot what the second community was. I think it was Ibodi, or Ibodi. I don't know what the pronunciation is, but
Yeah, it's actually Ibodi. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, Ibodi community and Ifewara in Osun State, where basically illegal miners have basically gathered in these communities and have disenfranchised, like they've taken over people's cocoa farms, uh, they've cut down trees, uh, they are just exploiting and mining good. Like basically, you have people from Mali, people from Niger, people from Zamfara, people from Katsina, people from everywhere in the West African sub-region have descended on these communities in Osun State to mine gold, and they are making a killing. Basically, apart from Segilola, there is no other regulated or account. I mean, I'm talking about money that can be traced, right? From, you can see the structures, you can see the operations, and you can see the company responsible, and you can tax them, and so on and so forth. Apart from that, Segilola Gold Mining, which is like the pilot gold mining company in the entire country that actually has physical presence on ground. All other gold mining activities is basically either artisanal or outright illegal, right? So apart from Segilola, all other gold mine, like, it's all illegal. It's all illegal. The Ibodi community, like I said, Ifewara, Aidade village, um, villagers all over these places are basically lamenting that their communities have been taken over by foreigners who are there mining for both underground gold and alluvial gold. You know, underground alluvial gold was actually discovered around Ilefe and Ilesha in commercial quantities around the year 1940 by the government of the western region of back then. Of course, there were also mining activities that were carried out for alluvial gold, though, around the Owena River um, between the years 1940 and 1952. Several ounces of gold were mined, but it was later, the entire operation was later, it became moribund. But of course, there is a resuscitation now, and several other gold layers have been discovered, basically in the area spanning between Ife, Oshun East, and the western part. If you leave Ifewara on your way east, basically you are entering Ondo. So that area seems to be one of the richest gold belts in the country. And like I said, there are people from all over. There's a story of this Rabiu guy, a 24-year-old artisanal gold miner from Katsina, who came there, and upon seeing how rich the gold field, he went back and brought over like so many other people to come there and mine gold. So that is that about gold. Anyways,
Yeah, I
um,
remember seeing that white line. Was it a video?
no, it's an investigative. The link is
I think I saw a video of this, exactly what you're describing, and they were telling the journalist to be careful where he stepped because there was so much mining going on that the ground could cave in under him. I'm not sure if it's the same one, but I
it
think it's in the
might
same community.
be, and it might not be, because part of what the investigative journalists actually saw in these areas were large open pits um, that were basically filled with water. So after they mine and pan for gold in those areas, like, it basically becomes large mud.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it could be. And of course, there were also reported incidences of certain buildings caving in those areas because of the massive amount of gold mining going on in these areas. So Yeah. All right. So after gold, the next resource I have here is it's an agricultural resource, and it's it's we all know, we've all had stories, right? We are all familiar with what this product is. It's cocoa. Um, in the year 2020, Nigeria produced 328,263 tons of cocoa and ranked number 4 in the world. Um, as of 2 years ago, 2020. Cocoa is Nigeria's top non-oil related export. So after the oil and gas related exports coming out of Nigeria, the number one product is cocoa. So of course, it's Nigeria's top agricultural produce. Nigeria producing 328,000 tons of cocoa. You might think it's a lot, but you will be surprised to know, or maybe not surprised, that the relative global rank of Nigeria has dropped from the highs it was able to achieve in the 60s and 70s, where when Nigeria alone was producing 21% of the world's or the global cocoa supply. So between 1960s, 1970s, as at back then, Nigeria was producing 308,000 tons of cocoa, but since then, production figures has only marginally increased to, like I said earlier, 328,000 tons in the 2020s. So in the 1960s and 70s, Nigeria was producing almost a quarter of the world's cocoa supply. But in 2020 and 2021, Nigeria was only producing 7% of the world's global supply of cocoa. Just imagine see the drastic decrease. See how far the country has plunged in cocoa production. Anyways, of this figure, the 328,000 tons of cocoa that was produced in Nigeria, uh, the Southwest or Yoruba land produced more than 80% of Nigeria's cocoa supply. Ondo State produced around 85,000 tons, or around 30% of the country's cocoa. Osun State produced around 73,000 tons, around 22% of all cocoa being exported from Nigeria. Oyo State produced around 33,000 tons, or around 10.1% of Nigeria's cocoa. And Ogun State produced around 30,000 tons, or around 9.14% of the cocoa being exported from Nigeria. Other states that produce cocoa include Ekiti. I mean, focusing on Yorubaland now, includes Ekiti, Kwara, and parts of Kogi. There is one state here. Cross River State is one of the highest cocoa producing states in the country, actually. It would surprise you to know that in the 90s, Cross River State was the highest cocoa producing state in the country, producing around 59,000 tons of cocoa, or around 18% of Nigeria's total output. But since then, I don't know what is wrong. I don't know what is happening. I don't know if it's black pod disease. I don't know if it's because the trees are getting old. But the cocoa yield coming out of Cross River State has continued to drop. And like I said, right now, more than 80% of all cocoa that is produced in Nigeria comes from Yoruba land. Uh, you know, basically from the highest producing states are, like I said, Ondo states, around 85,000 tons, Osun State, Oyo State, and Ogun State. Those are the top 4 cocoa producing states in Yoruba land. According to 2019 information from the World Trade Organization, uh, cocoa earned Nigeria more than 311 billion. Sorry. not billion. Cocoa earned Nigeria more than 311,338,000 in foreign exchange, and was Nigeria's number 4 export after oil and mineral fuels in number 1, accounting for more than 80%, ships and boats, and or ships, boats, oil rigs, and drilling equipment, uh, being number 2 at more than at around $3 billion. Base metals, base metals and metal articles at around $2 billion. So of course, these are all mining. These are all products from either mining, the extractive industry, or the manufacturing industry. And of course, the number 1 um, agricultural product there on the list was cocoa. And you know, uh, in the year 2014, Nigeria earned $627 million from cocoa exporting in that year. And if Nigeria is able, or if Yorubaland is able to double cocoa production from the highs that was seen or achieved in the year 2014, we will be looking at least $1.3 billion of foreign exchange in just cocoa seeds, right? We all know that so many policies and so many infrastructures of the old Western region were obtained from cocoa money. We have uh, WNTV, which was Western Nigeria Television at the time, the construction of the cocoa house in Ibadan, the various industrial estates like Oluyole and the rest. Of course, the entire funding, or the bulk of the funding for the Western region's universal basic education program, as well as the enrollment of teachers in teachers training colleges across Yorubaland, or across the Western region of then, to go through teachers training in order to graduate and teach the kids, was all funded, primarily from cocoa money. Or even the building of some of our most loved and cherished educational institutions, such as the Obafemi Awolowo University, was mostly from money gotten from cocoa, right? Um, if you take a look at Nigeria's what's it called, official trade gazette from in between 1958 and 1963, uh at that particular period in time, or at that particular period of time, nigeria's nigeria's highest forex earner, you know was cocoa. So many people think it's palm oil, but it's not palm oil. So many people think it's groundnut from the popular groundnut pyramids in the north, but it was not groundnut. So many people think maybe it was cotton or hides and skins or even tin. No, it was none of those products. Nigeria's highest foreign exchange earner from the late 50s into the 60s was cocoa. More than more than $6.85 million out of a total export duty of $15.334 million, or around 38% of Nigeria's total export duty in the 60s, or the particular year in question. I think it was 62 or 63. I'll check my sources. Around 38% of Nigeria's total export duty was from cocoa alone. It was more than double the second highest earning product for Nigeria at the time, which was palm kernels. Palm kernel was the second highest earning foreign exchange earner at the time, and number 3 was, I think, groundnuts. So at the time, cocoa earned more than 5,850,000 dollars. Palm kernels earned around $2,300,000. But of course, other uh, products derived from, we all know how useful the palm tree is, right? From the palm tree, you can derive a whole lot of other products. There were palm kernel meals and cake, um, the palm oil itself. I mean, like edible palm oil, right? Earned around $950,000. But all together, all the products obtained from the palm oil tree, which includes the palm kernels, the palm kernel cake, the palm kernel seeds, and so on and so forth, was around $3 million plus, as compared to $5.8 million that was gotten from just cocoa. This is from, if you need the sources, I can back channel this to you. This is from the official Trade Gazette of Nigeria, 1958 to 1963. And the third highest earning product at the time, which was groundnuts, earned around $2.5 million in total forex earnings for Nigeria in that year. So you can now begin to see how the Western region was able to get the funds that they used in the building of all these pilot projects. Uh, so many of the firsts that the city of Ibadan was known for at the time, were built using the money gotten from these resources. It would also interest you to know that at the particular time frame that we are sampling, the Western region was topping the production of two of the three highest earning commodities or foreign exchange earners for the country at the time. Of course, the region was producing at that time more than 90% um, of the country's cocoa exports, but was also producing significantly, uh, was also topping in the second highest earning product, which was palm kernels. I'm not talking about palm oil now, I'm talking about palm kernel seeds, right? The Western region was also the highest exporter of palm kernel seeds, which was the second highest forex product which was earning around $2.3 million for Nigeria at the time, adjust for inflation. The year in question is 1963, between 1958 and 1963. So I adjust for inflation and try so that you would know how much those figures would be as at 2022 figures. But worthy of note is the fact that the global chocolate industry is worth around $130 billion, right? Again, the global chocolate industry is worth around $130 billion. Uh, the 2019 chocolate export by regions of the world, Europe traded $21.7 billion of chocolate. North America traded $3.9 billion of chocolate. Asia traded around $2.5 billion of chocolate. Latin America traded around $350 million of chocolate. And Africa traded a paltry $346 million of chocolate, which is only marginally higher than Oceania, which does not even produce any raw cocoa paste or cocoa seeds, which traded around $262 million of chocolate. So Oceania is basically Australia, New Zealand, and the surrounding Pacific islands. So if you look at that, one thing is very, very clear, that the value of cocoa money lies in the processing and adding of value to cocoa, and not just the exporting of raw cocoa seeds or raw cocoa pastes. In fact, like I said earlier, Nigeria in the year 2019 earned $311 million, $311.3 million from its total cocoa export in the year 2019. But if you go into the chocolate industry, you would see that $311 million is nowhere when you look at Europe. Europe does not have any single tree of cocoa growing on that continent, right? What do they do? African countries export cocoa to Europe, but they add value to that cocoa, right? And they trade in chocolate. But of course, the raw material for chocolate, which is the cocoa beans and the cocoa oil and cocoa paste, comes from Africa. So we are basically resource. We just produce raw material. We are resource. We are like resource pools, right? And we send these primary resources to Europe and the Americas and Asia, And what do? They add value to it and make more than 1,000% profits off these raw materials that we send to them. So Africa basically does not add any value to the raw materials they produce. Case in point, the cocoa we're talking about now. Africa only earned $350 million from the chocolate industry, whereas Europe, that doesn't have a single cocoa tree growing on their continent, earned $21.7 billion from the cocoa industry, right? The entire African continent earned just $350 million from the cocoa industry. So the entire African continent is only earning a little bit more than what Nigeria earned from the export of raw cocoa beans in the year 2019. So Nigeria does not even earn as much as, say, a country like Belgium, right? Just one country in Europe that is at the forefront of the chocolate industry worldwide. Nigeria earns nowhere close to even Italy or Spain when it comes to products that are derived from cocoa. So, like I said, the value, right? The value of cocoa, or the value that can be gotten from the trade in cocoa and cocoa derived products lays primarily in the processing and the adding of value to cocoa, rather than just the export of the cocoa beans or the cocoa paste or the cocoa seeds itself. You would earn your money if you export those products, fine, but it's nowhere close to the amount that can be potentially gotten if you just manage to process those cocoa beans into chocolate bars, which is a process that is not even cumbersome at all. At all. I think at present, in the entirety of Ondo State, which is the highest cocoa producing state in the country, I don't think there's up to three chocolate producing factories in the entire state. And if the state can leverage on its cocoa resources, right, to just add a little bit more value, just grind the cocoa into paste, add oil, and mold them into chocolate bars, right, you would be earning more than 500% more profit from just the same product. But we don't do that in Africa. We're just commodity exporters. Anyways, that is that about cocoa and the potential it has, you know, in a future independent Yoruba country. If there's anyone that has any questions, they can ask now before I go on to the next product.
Hello,
Yes, we can hear you. Please,
hello.
you can go on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's quite sad. Um, the fact that we don't add value and we have all these natural resources. And the interesting one, you spoke about bitumen, um, and it's used to make roads. Is that correct?
Yes, it's used as an aggregate binder to bind gravel and some other products that are used in road layering. Yeah,
Yeah. And I
and
think what you said was that,
road
yeah,
surfacing basically. Yeah.
yeah. So and what you were saying, you don't make much money in the processing of it compared to iron ore, isn't it?
So sorry, can you
Um,
repeat that question?
so, so the cost of processing it is quite high. So you probably won't make much money if you export it.
Well, Nigeria imports bitumen for road construction. So when there are
Ah,
vast resources of bitumen right here in the country, but the country still imports
yeah,
bitumen.
that's that's quite shocking. That's unbelievable. And I'm thinking, well, the most parts of the south were badly in need of road construction. There should be a lot of road construction going on, and that's not even happening. You know, I went to Abuja and I noticed there are a lot of good roads there. You know, so it's as if it's intentional from not developing the south. You know, both the government and the states. You know, not developing the south, and it's quite sad. Um, But hopefully, when we have a control of our resources, then all these great ideas of adding value, not only just being a more raw material pool, deposit pool, you know. So yeah, I think Yoruba Nation is the only option we have moving forward. I need the mic for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Um, as at 2019, Nigeria imported around um, 300 billion naira worth of bitumen to be used in road surfacing and construction. So, um, which is the equivalent of around 5 million tons of processed bitumen, which Nigeria imports from other countries, imports from Europe, even imports from Cote d'Ivoire. Can you imagine? Nigeria imports bitumen from Ivory Coast. Anyways, uh, so the amount that Nigeria spends on importing bitumen, like I said earlier, is more than the annual budget of 31 out of 36 Nigerian states, excluding only Lagos, Ogun, Rivers, Akwa Ibom, and Cross River states, and is more than double the amount that Ondo State spends on its entire citizens' infrastructure, recurring expenditure, capital expenditure, and all, which stands at 171 billion naira for the year 2019. So you can see how much the country is losing to this product that is basically at the beck and call. Thank you very much, Mr. Omotayo, for your contribution. Are there any other questions or contributions?
Yes,
So, uh,
White Lion. Uh,
yeah.
I just want to add something quickly to one of the comments that you made, which I think was fantastic, and that's about value added, or what I call extraction of surplus capital. See, export promotion and import substitution are two fundamental economic practices. One of the reasons why Yoruba land is poor within the context of Nigeria is because Nigerian leaders, especially this crazy guy Buhari, loves to practice import substitution. The problem with that, which is premised on self-reliance, the problem with that is that you shouldn't substitute imports of anything that you don't have comparative advantage in. So when you substitute imports, most of the things that we import in Nigeria are luxury goods or capital goods. We don't have the capacity to substitute those imports because if you substitute imports, you have to be able to produce those items. But we don't have the capacity. We don't even have the know-how to do them. So what that does is that it creates this parallel exchange rate because some people that have got money, they still want to consume those goods. So there will be increase in what is it called, underground market, and then that will put a pressure on the currency of that country. Um, impoverishing people that are already poor, and bringing down the standard of living of people, especially or more specifically Yoruba people. And we can see the impact of that import substitution policy, in Yoruba land and on Yoruba people. But you mentioned something that I think is very important, which is export promotion. During the Western region, the Yoruba, we practice export promotion, and that's export promotion of cocoa. We set up the cocoa marketing board, and then we, started exporting, cocoa. And the only thing we did not do, as you, mentioned, we did not extract surplus capital from the cocoa that we export. But we did practice export promotion nonetheless. What I'm saying is that we have comparative advantage in the production of cocoa and cash crops. And we should focus on that. We should focus on those agricultural products that we have comparative advantages in, because as we know, comparative advantages leads to division of labor. Division of labor leads to specialization, efficiency, and then the rise in wages. And rise in wages leads to higher standard of living for our people. So we practice export promotion in during the regional system. We we'll practice that again when we have Yoruba land. And not only we will promote export of agricultural products and other products that we can produce that we have comparative advantage or advantages in, we will also promote the export of tourism, or export of Yoruba culture. There's ever-present vista of mountains, hills in Yoruba interland that we can invite these people. If you go to Ekiti, you see it's beautiful vista, right? Um, we have Ifa divination system, Ifa. Those are cultural heritage. We have heritage sites that we can promote for people to come and spend money in our land. Like I mentioned previously, Saudi Arabia made upward of I don't know $16 billion from tourism, so we can,
Religious tourism, yeah.
yeah, religious tourism, which is, you know, like half of what Nigeria expend on its population in a year. So we can do the same because we have the same, spiritual philosophy that's embraced the world over. So I just think I should add that. But that's a fantastic point you made about value added, which I call extraction of surplus capital. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful submission, Mr. Ojo. You talked about, focusing on areas, which is actually why I'm not just talking about all products or, all the resources that can be found in Yoruba land, but only for now on the resources where Yoruba land has a competitive edge or a competitive advantage in its production, whether because of natural reasons such as climate, vegetation, or things that just occur naturally but are of the best quality of the kind of those materials that can be found anywhere in the world. uh, we would probably, you know, I think we should host, like you said, there are also many other exports. This time, uh, more of cultural and intangible exports. That are that can become a very, very, very powerful revenue base for a prospect for the Yoruba nation of the future. Things that can be foreign exchange earners, very, very good sources of forex, but which are not. They are, like I said, in cultural and intangible resources of Yoruba land. I think we should have a discussion around that. So, Mr. Ojo, thank you very much. In the absence of any further uh, questions or comments, I think I'm going to talk about the next resource that I.
Um, Black Lion has a question.
Okay, yeah, Black Lion, please.
Yeah,
Sorry, I wasn't
thank
looking
you.
at.
Thanks
Yeah,
very much. Yeah, it was more of a comment though, just to add to what you said. Yeah, actually, yeah, it's sad the fact it's sad that we get only a little percentage of um the total worldwide revenue of cocoa production in general. But I think there are two companies from the southwest now that are involved in processing chocolate. One of them is Luscious Chocolate, done by a young lady, Oluwafemi. I've forgotten her surname now. And while the other one is Dawn Commission inspired project that are based in Ondo State. They're also involved in chocolate production. Well, obviously, they are myself and Otumba. I think we discussed this in length in a room a while back, a couple of weeks back, where we talked about some of the mitigating factors that is actually stopping them from working at optimum. One of them being electricity supply and stuff like that. So yeah, in a Yoruba nation, sorry, it will be very, very different, obviously. And I think we'll sort of see a far more competitive approach in terms of getting on top of the food chain of how this production works, instead of just exporting the raw materials as we're currently doing. So yeah, I just wanted to add that to your earlier submission.
that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Like I said earlier, um, companies or factories that do value added to cocoa that is being exported from Ondo State, I don't think they are up to three. I think there is one in the there's an industrial zone now that is being, the nexus of that is around the Ore or the Shagamu Benin expressway, in and around that Ore area. There's a Chinese funded um agro processing zone there. It's called the Chinese Lingyi or industrial free trade zone, something like that. I'm not sure. And there is one of those cocoa processing factories is there. There's another one in very close to Owo that also does the processing. The Don Commission inspired one that you're talking about, I haven't heard about that one before, but like I said, the value in cocoa does not even the value of cocoa is not in the exporting of cocoa beans. The value of cocoa is in the trading of chocolate and other cocoa derived products. Um, so that is that.